Hi, I'm Paulette,
Hi, I'm Felipe.
and we're here to share about A Course in Miracles and our experiences and the insights that we've gotten from studying this and practicing it in our daily lives. Enough people have been talking with us or asking us about this, saying that, wow, it's so amazing, but that there are a lot of parts, a lot of words, or sometimes it's just so dense or so much at once that it's a little overwhelming. So we decided to share a little bit about um, what our process has been and share some stories and examples of what has helped us and the process that we went through each other and through life, and also whatever quotes or parts from the book jump out or that we receive to share about. And we're going to start from the beginning and make our way through the text, the exercises, and also the manual for teachers.
Yeah, so the idea is to have a very practical application of the text. Of course, it has so a lot of depth in every single sentence, but it's about be open and also receptive to the teachings that the book has to offer, and at the same time be open to allow these teachings to penetrate us without questioning or judging them, because the book even talks in the beginning, as we are going to see in a little bit, that we don't have to agree with them, we don't need to believe in them, or we don't need to actually agree or disagree with them, but much more put them into practice. And through practice is when they were going to click on us and make sense for us in our daily life.
Yeah, thank you. So I also just want to share a little bit about how the course has entered into my life. And for me, it was that I started listening to a lot of audiobooks. There was a period, a couple of years, where I was just obsessed with audiobooks, and I kept hearing A Course in Miracles mentioned, and it always just did something to me, like a little ding, you must read this at some point. And I kind of forgot about that, tucked it away in my mind. And then it was actually 3 years ago in 2015 when I met Felipe that he was also talking about A Course in Miracles. And at that point for me, I decided, okay, yeah, I've heard this enough times. And for me, once I hear enough of these prompts from different places and sources, it's like, okay, it's time for me to actually listen and to take action. So I started listening to the audiobooks, also reading parts of the text. But for me, audiobook listening was a lot easier to absorb the material, and I listened to it over and over and over again. But for me, it wasn't until we actually started talking about it and going into some of the concepts that things started to make sense. Before that, it was just like, it was, I don't know, like sort of too far away for my mind to actually comprehend what in the world it could have been talking about. So I found that really helpful. And then for me, once I started actually doing the daily exercises, which took me maybe a year and a half or so, um, that's when it started to sort of make sense, because I was actually applying it to daily life and seeing, oh my gosh, and every single time I had a lesson, something in life presented that exact lesson. It's kind of amazing how that seems to work. And so after all that time of doing the daily lessons, I started to see the difference in how I perceived life and how my personal state of being was, and how I wasn't so swayed by the things that happened in life, that I could just understand it in a much deeper level. So that's my experience, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and for me, it was quite similar. Um, but I have to mention that I was feeling very unhappy and kind of unfulfilled or empty within. That a process in my life started to be started by guiding me to conferences or people talking, and start to open up myself to new ideas and new ways of living. And as you mentioned, I hear certain authors talking about Course in Miracles here and there, and something within myself said like, this book sounds kind of interesting. Actually, I didn't know it was a book. I thought it was kind of
an actual course,
or a seminar, something like that. And I did like to study at that point. So much, everything that was available to study, I wanted to do it. So I just googled it. I found that it was actually a book, but I haven't seen it before, you know. So yeah, I arrived to a point in my life that I was very unhappy, and I was quite meditating, and I just received very clear, like a message, like an inner voice telling me to stop suffering. And I thought that it was something in the world, or that it was at least what I did was projected into animals and food, because it was what I was doing. So
you thought the message was, okay, stop suffering, stop all suffering, become a vegan.
Yeah, so is what I thought. The next day I became vegan. But what was curious for me is that I went to the small center in one of my days off back when I was working, and I was feeling just like a zombie, like a walking dead, to just walk in there and purposeless. I want just to eat. And when I was leaving, I received kind of, no, go to the bookstore. I didn't feel that kind of feeling so often, but I went inside the bookstore and I thought that I was going to look for a self-help book or a cookbook. But once I was there, it was it's not it. It was guiding me towards something else. So I turned right, because I just felt that like something was managing me, like I was a puppet. And I went to this part of the bookstore, and I turned my face, and I saw just right there this big book, like a Bible, blue book saying A Course in Miracles. And I just felt so happy that I just had to take it with me, and I just immediately bought it. So in that moment, I just say to myself, I'm going to start studying this thing. I don't know what even this is about. So I tried to study it many times, in the times off in my work, or when I was doing part-times and things like that. But every time that I try to read it, I fall asleep. Many times I had such a resistance. So for me, it's been a process like it took me like 7 years to actually pass through the whole course until the manual of teachers, and I started again. It is how my experience has been with the book.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how it happens. It's like it just grabs your attention, and then like we still have some resistance, and then maybe it comes again. And then we're like, okay, that's too much, it's too intense, and then it comes again. I've heard that story so many times with so many people that it's just kind of funny, now.
Yeah, looking back is actually a very memorable moment for me, to laugh at, and to see the resistance of the barriers that I was putting to go through the text, because the language was very difficult, because it was so thick and so on.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna start with just the preface. The preface was written later, after a lot of people had requests for an introduction, because I think it is a bit much to just suddenly jump into, the words of the truth. It's like, what? Where did this book come from? Who's writing this?
Yeah, and what is very interesting, how it come used to this couple of guys, Hannah Schuckman and William Tedford. They were very kind of scientist mindset, I would say, living in New York, relating with this kind of environment, and Helen describes in the preface how her boss told her that he was very tired of being very upset and angry And I think that is something that all of us relate to. You know,
Oh yeah.
can I cannot even count how many times I've been upset. You know, but when he said there must be another way, it's just like something pull her up into say, you know, I'm willing to help you discover that there is another way, and it's how the courses start to get into form.
So yeah, about the preface. For me, I just found it so fascinating that Helen Schuckman, William Thetford, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, that they were professors of medical psychology at Columbia University's College of Physicians and Surgeons in New York. And I sort of came from that kind of world where science is king, and logic and reason, and anything that was sort of spiritual or didn't have any science backing was just ignored or laughed at. And so that to me actually made it a little more accessible, a little bit more believable for me. The fact that she was an atheist and was, seemingly like the last person that would channel or write something like this, I think it helps to make it more sort of acceptable to people.
Yes, and even the preface says that William Tedford and Helen Schuckman will be the last persons that will live in the way that the course would mention. They have a particular way of training children and live their lives, mostly based in their own cultures, in their own ideas. So when Helen decided to be in this objective with his companion of finding that there must be another way to live, is when she actually started hearing what she called the voice with capital V, guiding her and giving her this information of this transcript from within that was not kind of automatic. It just starts at certain points and fades in other points, and she was just doing her best to follow it and to write it in her papers or whatever she was using. I think it was a hand script.
Mm-hmm. It was a short form, shorthand journal. But yeah, this concept of there has to be another way. This is a phrase that I've heard a lot of people say, and we've been teaching theta healing seminars and also workshops on detoxification and nutrition. So a lot of people have shared with us their stories of there has to be another way, where whatever seems to be happening in their lives, they've tried and tried and tried and done and failed and seemed to come to the end of the road, but it seems so sort of depressing or just like exhausting when you get to that point. But actually what that means is that you realize, okay, this is not the way. This is not leading me anywhere. This is not leading me to happiness, even though the world or society or my family or whatever, my ideas told me that this was going to lead to my happiness. This was going to lead to my success. But, a lot of people have that experience. Once they do get to that point, it's like, wait, why does it feel so empty? Why do I feel all these things? And that's actually the perfect opportunity to start to question everything that they thought they knew along the way, and to ask, is there another way? And usually it's, when you've gone down that road, then you start to realize that, okay, I need to put my effort and my willingness somewhere else. And that it is that little bit of willingness that opens up something completely new.
Absolutely, and for Helen and for her companion, it was this little willingness that helped to write this material that we have now with us.
Which took 7 years, by the way.
Yeah, so it's very amazing to see, because even with this background that Helen and William Tedford had of being scientists, it's so beautiful to listen or to read Helen saying that the book is just the demonstration that with God there's nothing impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So it just shows us that is a very important part of the book, and also the experience of Helen to encounter this or to face that realization in her life that with God is never and there's nothing impossible. So the book is kind of going to take us towards that direction through deepening into spirituality. And even though the book has Christian terms and Christian kind of connotations, the spiritual teachings are universal. So it's so beautiful to even read that in the preface we find that it says that it's not the only way. It is a way that helps us to get in touch with our inner master, with our inner intuition or the inner voice, the voice that speaks from God.
Mm-hmm. A part in the preface that I found significant to read here is that the course emphasizes application rather than theory and experience rather than theology. To me, that is so important because I think the first 3 times that I was listening to the course in the audiobook form, I was really only connecting to it as ideas and concepts. It was like my mind was still rationalizing everything and saying, oh yes, that makes sense. And I have a lot of experiences with people too when we're talking about these ideas that other people and myself, will say, oh yes, of course, yeah, universal love, these sweeping concepts that seem so easy to just accept to the mind. But it's really one thing to have the idea and accept the idea, and it's another thing to actually live it and to actually experience it. And that to me is one of the most important parts of the course. And that there are, I guess, people that maybe sometimes do get stuck in the rationalization and the conceptualization of the material in the text without actually applying it. But when you apply it and actually allow yourself to experience these concepts, that's when it starts to really do the work that I think it's meant for.
Absolutely. And we may find that Helen has exposed in the preface too that the book is formed or composed for 3 parts: the text, the book, the workbook, and the manual for teachers. So the text is kind of all the ideas and the teachings that are going to be shared with us to help us understand how our mind works and understand what is the thought system that the book is actually sharing, what is the objective of the book itself. Then, as you say, the workbook is where we are going to actually apply our daily lessons, and it recommends, as the preface says, to not do more than 1 a day, but also doesn't say that you need to do 1 every day. You can stay for longer if an idea resonates with you, because during the process, at least in my experience, I found so many ideas that I just meditate and meditate and meditate and meditate, because they bring us to such a deep, profound experience of love, and sometimes even beyond the words that are said. It's just like a rocket launcher that take you and then just once it explodes in the space, and then you're just in the cabin in the stillness. It's just so beautiful. So then it has the manual for teachers, which is just actually how we live it and how we demonstrate in our daily life. And part of us sharing this material is because to share it and to extend it is a way actually to learn it, and it's what the course says. That doesn't mean that everyone should share it as we felt inspired to, and if you feel inspired to do videos and share it, go for it, awesome. It's much more how we live it in our daily life and how we apply it in our mind, in our daily experiences. So yeah, that's the parts that are far more contained inside the book.
Yeah. And then it talks about what it says. And I think that this is such a huge topic, because the first lines are, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And the first several times that I read that, I was like, sure. I didn't quite get it. It didn't quite sink in. And it took a lot of repetition and discussion until I could read it and finally understand it.
Yeah, it's a deep teaching of the courses, how actually it began. But it's also important to have in mind that while we are doing this process is to allow the Reader Master to guide us and to get in touch with us and to allow us to interpret those messages and those deep teachings and to open up our mind to this kind of ideas that are being shared in the book. As the book says in the preface, the book is actually a beginning. It's not an ending, and the objective is not to actually define what is divine love or define what is God, because that's way beyond concepts. That's way beyond any kind of possible rationalization that we can give into the world. But actually what it's doing is to helping us undoing or clearing or exposing our mindset, to help us change it, to help us discover what is truth, what actually cannot be threatened, and what actually is real, so then we can have this experience through the doing in our daily life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so fascinating because after it says this little beautiful paragraph that you just read, if you don't mind to repeat.
Sure. Nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.
So yeah, this part for me is so useful and so important in the book, to read it and read it, and every time that I read it I just very fascinated, because it starts sharing with us that there is the word of knowledge, of knowingness, which is God, which is love. That love doesn't change, that God doesn't change, is eternal, will never sweep into or change into forms, into differences, into opposites. That all there is just pure beingness, pure love, pure essence, pure spirit. And of course, we are being created in that knowingness. Then it says that there is also the seeming word of perception.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we see ourselves in perception, which is the words of opposites,
of time, of change, of beginnings and endings.
Yeah, of births and deaths.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As soon as we see that we are inside that experience, we are trapped into a dream, inside a dream. So that's very fascinating, because it's not the only theology or a study that expose that idea that is a dream, that the perceptual world is a dream.
Mm-hmm.
But then it takes a little farther. It takes into saying that inside this perceptual world is actually the word of the scarcity, the lack, the death, the sickness, the illness.
Mm-hmm.
And is where we perceive ourselves with the body. So it starts very straightforward, showing these teachings that the body in essence is completely neutral.
Mm-hmm.
And it just will serve the mind, and it will serve, and the mind will serve the voice of the Holy Spirit, of the knowingness, the voice that is being given by God, or the ego, which is the invention of the form of the space and time and the opposites. Mm-hmm. And if the mind serves this Holy Spirit Master to help us do our purpose of going back from perception in awakening to knowledge, we are going to experience actually a health. We will experience a state of mind that is peaceful and harmony. But when we are not, and we are attacking, we are judging, as the ego mindset would invite us to do, the feelings or sensations or the illness or sickness will be inevitable.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the preface talks a little bit more about projection making perception, and also, redefining things like forgiveness, the Holy Spirit, what joining really is, and we're going to go more in depth when we get into those parts. So I think for now, we're just going to end this with this. One of the lines from the book is that there's only ever really one problem, and there's also only really one solution. And the problem is that we believe, or that we perceive, that we are separated from God. And the solution is to remember that we never have been separated. So, on that note, thank you so much for joining, and look forward to getting into the actual text.
Thank you.
Thank you.